This is the Tactical Defense Institute's K-Bar Shark Bite thermoplastic knife. It is made of a type of synthetic material called Ultramid that can hold an edge and won't warp, rust, or crack. It can easily perforate flesh with the full force of a driving hand behind it, and above all, it can slip through metal detectors. But I don't own this tool so I can punch holes into windpipes. I own it to demonstrate a point about Shinobi-zashi, the hidden blade of the samurai, and shinobi. This knife is intended to be carried concealed. People are not supposed to know you have it so that an element of surprise is preserved should one need to deploy it. Rather than carry a metallic blade, a thermoplastic or ceramic blade's existence connotes an intended use as a cutting tool that can evade detection in semi-non-permissive environments, places where one is not permitted to carry lead throwers or blades. This was also the intent behind the Shinobi-zashi, one of the Junitoku, 12 tools of virtue, recorded in the 17th century teachings of the samurai. According to the Heika Joden no Maki, the Shinobi-zashi is a concealed blade hidden on the body of a samurai that was carried for a number of purposes, including decapitation and self-defense. We are told by the writings of the samurai that the Shinobi-zashi was carried specifically in places where swords were banned. The historical record thus conveys that it was not just shinobi, but even samurai who had to deal with non-permissive environments. The purpose behind the Shinobi-zashi, then, was to keep the samurai armed at all times, and we know the blade wasn't just for utility purposes, for within the same aforementioned historical source we receive the teachings of Santo Isho, which is to stab a human target 3 consecutive times with the Shinobi-zashi. The hidden blade of the samurai can thus be viewed as a security measure for when one's swords were removed, in obeisance to law or custom, and even for assassination. A controversial claim predicated on the following reasoning. The samurai school I am sourcing from was ran by the Notori family. You might be familiar with one of this family's most important members, Notori Sandro Mazazumi, the man who is credited with writing the Shoninki, a 17th century ninjutsu manual. This is one fact that seems to support the notion that shinobi were also samurai. And within the writings of the ninja, we find the teaching of Mutoden, which tells us that shinobi agents were often presented to a lord for word-of-mouth instructions, and that, quote, he may hide a blade in his clothes or may snatch the sword the lord is wearing with the intent to kill him. End quote. This statement alone is enough to validate the idea that shinobi were assassins, for why include it in the Yokon Denkai Kudensho if an assassination by hidden blade or attempted assassination by stolen sword never occurred? And while I'm on this point, have historians who assert ninja were not assassins ever considered the hypothesis that shinobi-mediated assassinations were not something that chroniclers would write about? I mean, how does one find a verifiable instance of a shinobi assassinating a lord or officer or other target of significance if the very act was supposed to be secret and shrouded in the shadows of plausible deniability in the first place? Who would think that shinobi would break cover and lay claim to wet works in their writings or even communicate their involvement in such activities to anybody outside their occulted organization? I think this is something to ponder. Anyway, we know samurai and shinobi carried hidden blades, and we know that these blades were carried in places where the security protocol required removal of other weapons, like your katana. We also know samurai were trained to kill with these hidden blades, as were shinobi. Why and where people are getting the idea that shinobi were never involved in assassination, I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the principle of rejecting a hypothesis rather than seeking to confirm it. If one's hypothesis is that assassination by shinobi never occurred, then the scientific method dictates that one should seek to disconfirm this hypothesis by actively seeking out evidence indicating that shinobi did, in fact, carry out assassinations. If one persists in this method of trying to knock down one's own hypothesis but fails, then it becomes a fact of history. However, what if the truth cannot be found, ever, by anyone, because it was meant to stay in the dark eternally? Deep water makes no sound.
Let's